For now, though, Charean, let's get to it. The opt-out window has closed. The decisions have been made. 67 players. You know, I had someone tell me a couple of weeks ago, single digits will be the number of opt-outs. 67, the final tally. And Charean, if they had more time, I have a feeling the number would have been a lot higher.
Well, and they wanted more time, Mike. You saw Jamie Collins' quotes from yesterday that he would have liked more time. And, you know, they want to see when they get into practices how it's going to be. The 11-on-11 stuff, I mean, they've gotten a little taste of it now. And I get why the NFL wants the window when they want it, because they don't want more guys to opt out. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised that more guys didn't opt out. And I know you have a number of reasons from contracts why they should have thought about opting out, but the window did close, and now it's unusual circumstances is the only reason they can opt out now after the deadline yesterday.
Yeah, if you are diagnosed with a new health condition that puts you at higher risk, condition you didn't have before Thursday, August the 6th, or if a family member is hospitalized or dies from COVID-19, those are the two windows that a player can opt out after yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The other thing to remember, and a lot of this is driven by individual contract situations, specifically how much money would have to be paid back potentially in the event of a retirement, but the Andrew Luck route could be pursued. Preseason retirement, in-season retirement, unretirement. You can unretire all the way up until late November. We went through that with Jason Witten 2 years ago and Rob Gronkowski last year, but there are windows still there to walk away if you're not comfortable. And that's, Charean, what ultimately should drive this. Mark Murphy, the Packers CEO, who was part of the negotiating team, said earlier this week, we absolutely wanted players to have the ability to opt out. We want them to not play if they're not comfortable. Okay, fine. Why is the window so early? And I've seen people on Twitter saying, oh, you've had 5 months to decide. No, you've had 5 days to decide. You haven't been in the building to feel how safe you are or aren't. You haven't practiced 11-on-11. You haven't been in a game setting. You haven't been in a locker room before, during, or after a game. I'm hearing talk that they may eventually, it hasn't happened yet, but they may eventually take off those tracking devices and leave them outside the locker room, because once you go into the locker room, there's no way in hell they're going to be able to keep the guys apart. And if one guy ends up positive, they're all going to be shut down because they're all going to have the little green light beeping that shows they were in contact with that guy. So, you know, circumstances are going to change, and things are going to happen that haven't happened yet. And I just think it's only fair, if you care about these men as human beings, Charean, to give them an opportunity to revisit their situation and ask themselves the fair, objective question as to whether or not they're still comfortable.
Yeah, we saw that yesterday with the Dolphins, Mike, that many of their players, they put 6 players on the COVID list, as you first reported. And of those 6, it sounds like most or all of them had contact with the player who tested positive for COVID. Not that they tested positive for COVID, but that they were around someone who did. They got in too close contact. So, yeah, we may see some of that where they do take it off. Now, there are healthy fines if they do take it off, I am sure. But we may see some of that. But, yeah, they need longer to decide. We've seen it in baseball. We've seen players decide to opt out in the middle of the season. We've seen players decide to come back in the middle of the season. I understand if the NFL doesn't want those players to come back, but they should have more time to decide to walk away, simply because we haven't seen them in practices and other close quarter situations. I mean, I don't think they're having more than a few players in the building at a time right now. And so once they get together as a group, things are going to change, and they may decide that this isn't for me. I want to walk away from this. And as you said, retiring is probably the easiest way now to do that, but they don't get all the benefits of the opt-out that they would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, once it's the full-blown Petri dish locker room with stinky, smelly, sweaty shoulder pads and helmets and just everything that goes along with playing football with a full roster, that is going to be a different experience. And I think we will see potential changes to the policy as this goes. I think this idea of taking off the tracking device at the locker room door will be something that may be allowed, not necessarily a team goes rogue here or there to keep their guys from ending up on the COVID-19 list. We've seen potential changes to the confidentiality policy after the Matthew Stafford false positive. So this has to be kind of a living, breathing set of rules, because the more experience that the teams get, the easier it is to refine and understand and realize what should or shouldn't be done, which is all the more reason to have other spots where a limited window opens to let a guy opt out. Look, we've seen 8 Patriots opt out, 5 Browns opt out. No other team had more than 3. Amazingly, the Steelers, Falcons, and Chargers had none. But you may have guys who are carrying around stress. You may have guys who wake up today and say, I blew my chance. You may have guys a week or two from now who say, I really am not comfortable. I just wonder, and this is something that I hadn't considered until just now, Charean, what happens if a guy just decides, screw it, I'm leaving? You can call it retirement. You can call it opt-out. You can say I'm on the reserve left squad list. You can do whatever you want. I'm not staying here. Fine me, take away bonus money, do whatever you want to do, but I refuse to do this. Then the question would become, what will the team do? What will the league do? Will they aggressively pursue a guy who stands up and says, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable here anymore? It would be a horrible PR mess for a team that tries to extract every last penny from that guy in punishment for violating his contract.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be surprised if we do see that. I expected more, Mike. I expected closer to 100, and I expected more big names. We had no quarterbacks on the list. They were mostly linemen on the list. How many did you expect to have, or did you not know what to expect when the opt-out began?
Well, when it began, people that I trust were all poo-pooing it, and I think that was the prevalent belief around the league, that it wasn't going to be many. Single digits, I heard from several different people, and then we're at single digits on the second day. As of yesterday, a lot of guys were considering it. And a lot of guys were considering it as a business move. And look, for anyone who was considering it as a business move, I got no problem with that, because you know what? The league and the teams constantly squeeze the players under the guise of business. It's going to happen later this month. Somebody making a $6 million salary is going to find out in late August that if he doesn't reduce the salary from $6 million to $2 million, he's getting cut. And if he gets cut, there's nobody out there that's going to have the budget to welcome him in at $6 million for this year. So leverage is applied on the players all the time. And there were players that I know of who actually felt like it would have shown a lack of integrity to take advantage of the opt-out rule for business reasons. And I said to somebody, look, I respect that decision, but reverse the situation. If a team has that kind of leverage, even though it's meant for something else, it's meant for guys who truly are concerned about playing in a pandemic, they'd take full advantage of that rule. They wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of that rule. So why are players, and it's on one hand refreshing, but also disappointing, because the teams would never, with very, very limited exceptions, give a guy a break under a situation like that. If they have a rule that they can use to their advantage to try to save some money, save some cap space, squeeze a guy to take less money, do whatever they can do, they'll do it. But, you know, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this reality, but it became clear to me yesterday, early afternoon, that for players with fully guaranteed contracts in 2020, whether you have years left on the back end or whether you're a franchise tag player like Dak Prescott, there are solid business reasons, or I guess the proper conjugation now that the window is closed is there were solid business reasons to think about opting out and taking that fully guaranteed salary for this year and bumping it to next year, simply because the way they resolved this, Charean, if half the season goes away, if the season ends at any point after week 1, all that money goes. You only get paid for the games you played, and the guarantees are no longer guaranteed. You wait until next year, and it's kind of like a hedge against the possibility that the season isn't going to be completed. But if you have fully guaranteed pay, you're not getting it if the season isn't completed. That's the business reason that I thought there would be more players, ultimately by 4 p.m. Eastern yesterday, who said, you know what, I'm making that bet that this isn't going to work, and I'll wait until next year to get my fully guaranteed salary.
Yeah, Tre'Davious White, DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, we heard a lot of big names that were thinking about doing it and ultimately decided to stay around. And that is the thing. You're betting now that there is going to be a full season. And I'm like you. I'm not confident as Mike Tomlin said yesterday, you can't have confidence that it's going to be a full and complete season this year with what we're seeing, especially in baseball. They've had 21 games rescheduled because of COVID outbreaks. And, we're going to have COVID outbreaks in the NFL. It's going to be a matter of how many on one particular team, what days of the week it is, who's out, all those sorts of things. So they have enough players to compete in a game on Sunday. And that's going to be the outcome to determine whether these games go on. The 256 games go on this year and finish, and then the postseason finishes. So, yeah, they're taking a gamble now, I think, having decided to stay around and that it is going to be a full season and they're going to play all the games. And we have no assurances that that's going to happen.
And here's the reality. The NBA, the NHL, MLS, they are in a full bubble, and it's working, right? It's working. Major League Baseball, there have been some incidents, but the bottom line is they don't get in a dog pile every play. They are distant on the field. The way baseball works, you've got limited situations where you have guys in close proximity. Football, they're going to be in close proximity starting in about 10 days when they do the fully padded practices, and then when the games start 5 weeks from last night, Texans-Chiefs. Look, and I don't want to be morbid here. It's hard to have that caveat, though, when we got over 160,000 people who have died as a result of this virus. But I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, let's just do the math here. Once we get to early September, you're going to have 170 people per franchise. 170 with the players, the coaches, the essential staff, the Tier 1 and Tier 2 personnel. You got 32 teams with that many people. You've got all shapes and sizes. You've got older people who are coaching. You've got younger people who have body mass index north of 30, who have comorbidities that could cause problems. When you just look at the sheer numbers and you stretch it out over a 5 to 6 month period, somebody's going to die at some point, right? They have to be ready for the reality, or at a minimum, very strong possibility that they're not going to get through a full season without someone connected to one of these teams, player, coach, or essential staff, not just getting COVID-19, not just developing symptoms, not just being hospitalized or intubated, but ultimately passing away from this. What happens then, Charean? We saw basketball, hockey, baseball, everything shut down simply because Rudy Gobert had a positive test on March 11. What happens? Are they prepared for this? And, there's a fear among some teams that this is all being set up so the league office can blame the team if it happens. That, well, basically, hey, if it happens, that means you weren't dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's under the protocol. So there's a pressure point there. But regardless of who gets blamed, we all need to accept that this is a very strong possibility. And we need to be thinking about how we're going to feel, what we're going to say, and what's going to happen next if and when that occurs over the course of the next 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Mike. It is a danger, and we've seen it in baseball at the lower levels. So some minor league staffers and coaches have died, and the game has gone on because it didn't happen at the major league level. And as you pointed out, Corey Stringer, I was at Cowboys training camp when Corey Stringer died of heat that one year, many years ago now, I guess. And things kept going, and players, were more conscious of hydrating, but they moved on with the game. It's sort of like NASCAR. When they have a death, they just keep going, and it's amazing to me. But as you said, Rudy Gobert shut down things instantly when he tested positive, and who knows where we would be or how long we would have gone if that hadn't happened. But it seems likely that we would have had more positive cases pretty quickly after that. But that shut down everything, and all it's going to take probably is one death, especially a death of a player, that we're going to see this whole, I keep calling it a house of cards, because I do think it's a house of cards we have going here right now.
Well, and part of the reason is the way that we have handled the pandemic as a society. People will say, well, hey, the Bundesliga Soccer League, they were able to finish their season. Premier League finished their season. They're starting up another one on September 12th. Yeah, in their countries, it's been contained. In their countries, it's been controlled. What's happening here is we're trying to play football in these communities where the virus is just rampant, and schools are going to open in a lot of these communities, or at least they're going to try to open them. And this idea of sending everyone home at night, even if everyone goes home and stays home and doesn't go out and do any of the things that could get them in trouble with their teams or with the league, you have other people that you may be living with who are out and about doing things. And with the prevalence of the virus, it makes it impossible to keep it away from the players, the coaches, the people who go home at night. That's why we're seeing teams set up these unofficial voluntary bubbles like the Saints in training camp, like the Buccaneers are going to have available, getting a hotel, basically booking it for the entire season and having it available for anybody who wants to be there. And the more guys who are there, Charean, the more pressure there's going to be on the guys who go home to not go home. And that may be the only chance. So look, there are people in the league who believe they could have pulled off a full bubble if they really wanted to do it, if they had started planning it back in March when they should have, not in July or August when they say, oh, crap, maybe we should have a full bubble. It's a little late now to do that. But the city-by-city bubble may be the only way to pull this off, whether it's voluntary, whether at some point the union agrees to it. But this is something that coaches, players, staff need to be thinking of. There may be a full lockdown where you're in the same city as your family, but you're not going to see them until the end of the season. And that's another occasion to have an opt-out window, even if it's a limited one. Because there may be guys then who say, sorry, I'm just not going to do this. This isn't what I signed up for. But that may be the only way to pull this off, Charean, and that may be the only way to keep someone from ultimately getting it and dying.
Yeah, we saw it with Andrew Whitworth is the perfect example of that. His nanny went out to lunch with the family friend, ate lunch, came home, gave it to everyone in the family, everyone in his family. They passed it on to his in-laws. His father-in-law ended up in the hospital and nearly died from this. So it shows you how this thing can spread, and kids are going back to school, and they are going to bring it home, and families are going to get it. So the best way to do it, obviously, is to sequester the player, and some players are going to do it and some aren't, and it is going to put pressure on those players who don't do it because they are going to be obviously way, way, way more subjected to the virus, chances of contracting the virus than guys who are staying in a hotel around the team.
Yeah, I think creativity, flexibility, commitment to doing what needs to be done to protect the players and to get the games in. Everyone now has a clear financial incentive to get every game in because the players are only going to get paid for the games that are played. And if you have a guaranteed salary, it really isn't guaranteed. We've got the stories at PFT. Check it out. And if nothing else, at this point, because you can't opt out, it doesn't matter. But the guys with fully guaranteed salaries have extra incentive to ensure that their players make good decisions and maybe to influence them to volunteer to stay at the hotel and draw that bubble around each team in the hopes of getting all 256 games in. All right, the man who quoted the man who said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, met with the media yesterday. Tom Brady had some things to say. You'll hear about it next here on Pro Football Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.